From the News Channel 5 Network, this is Inside Politics.
Hello, everyone. I'm News Channel 5's political analyst Pat Nolan. Welcome to Inside Politics. As the nation begins to focus more and more with each passing month on the 2020 elections and domestic politics, this appears to also be an extraordinarily active time in U.S. foreign policy for the administration of President Donald Trump. To put all that activity in perspective and in context, we are pleased to welcome back to Inside Politics this week Dr. Thomas Schwartz from Vanderbilt University. Professor Schwartz, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Well, thank you for having me on the program.
Let's talk about China. We've reactivated the trade war this week. President Trump's embraced tariffs on a lot more imported goods from China, about 25%. The Chinese have responded with their own additional tariffs. Who's winning this war?
Well, I think there won't be a clear winner in the war. The question is whether there will be some sort of an agreement. Remember, this is about far more than tariffs. It's about issues in the way in which China has behaved since it joined the WTO. The issues of intellectual property, the question of forced partnerships, these sorts of things. And supposedly about 2 weeks ago, they had made series of concessions with strong enforceability provisions and then withdrew them. And that the president then reacted with these tariffs.
Have both sides sort of miscalculated? I mean, some of the things that President Trump wants the Chinese to do would require changes in Chinese law and changes in the policies of the Communist Party in China. On the other hand, did the Chinese think, well, President Trump's approaching elections, he wants to get reelected, he wants a deal? Did they sort of think, and then suddenly they realize, whoops, that's not going to work, and the president maybe has miscalculated as well, and where he thought the Chinese were?
I think it's very likely that both sides are playing on certain things. So from the Chinese perspective, they've also seen the president walk away from the deal with North Korea, or at least hype it up and then pull back on that, and that doesn't seem to be working. They may have thought, especially because their tariffs seem to target American agriculture, where Trump is strongest politically, that if they do apply their return, that the president, of course, is up for re-election in a way that Chinese Premier Xi is not, and so that they have a certain staying power because of their political system to possibly pressure him to want a deal much more quickly.
But the Chinese economy is weaker. It's not necessarily smaller than the U.S., but it's not growing like it used to, so they're a little bit more at risk because their economy has been slowing down.
Well, the United States market is extremely important to the Chinese. There is a big trade imbalance because the Chinese do rely on the American market. There's far more American direct investment, or far more of that, and so that there are a lot of issues where the Chinese may feel far more vulnerable.
It's hard to know what's going to happen next. It looks like there may not be any talks directly between China and the U.S. until the president goes to the G20 and meets with Premier Xi when he's over there. That's a long time. That's not till sometime next month.
Right.
The president seems to be downplaying it this week, calling this just a little tiff. How is it a little tiff when the two largest economies in the world are at odds with each other?
Well, in a way, not that I can read President Trump's mind. I think that's probably well beyond it. It may be that by downplaying it, he gives Xi at least a better face-saving way to back away from what the Chinese had done. So he may be playing a game here of trying to make it seem less serious, maybe then allowing the Chinese then to return to the concessions that they had made as a way of going and getting the agreement.
A lot of economists have criticized the president's continued use of tariffs. He's putting off more tariffs on European cars, Japanese cars, and others for about 18 months. What is his fascination with the use of tariffs, not only as an economic tool, but as a foreign policy tool?
Well, I don't think historically they have been used. It's only in a relatively recent period in American history that we've really had a free trade regime. We had a lot of protectionism at one point, and if you look back in even recent history, you'll see Buy America campaigns, other campaigns that were similarly both protectionist and nationalist on economic issues. So in some ways he's tapping into something that is rooted historically in American politics and American society, that we should be very careful about becoming too dependent on foreign trade or foreign products.
And he particularly liked tariffs back in the 80s when our big economic rival was Japan.
Yes, and in a way he reflects the debate that went on in the 80s in which the political parties were a little different. The Democrats then, particularly labor unions, were very supportive of tariffs, and it was the Republicans under Ronald Reagan who really resisted it.
Despite all the pushback by some in this country, so far it doesn't appear this has had any overall impact of a major nature on the American economy, at least the consumer economy. The farmers have had a tough time. But are we going to start to see a change? Walmart announced just in the last few days they're going to be raising prices. They obviously import a lot of things from China. If Walmart starts raising their prices, is that going to make people start looking differently at this whole situation with tariffs?
It certainly could. It certainly, that it would not be, I think, an exaggeration to say that a lot of the people who rely and shop on at Walmart are also Trump supporters, or at least sympathetic to his point of view. And if they start feeling pressured or hurt, they may reflect that. On the other hand, as long as the American economy remains strong, there is a greater tolerance, I think, to take some of these price increases and other things. It's just, it is hard to say. I mean, the Chinese are gambling. I think a lot of foreign nations are gambling that they won't have to deal with President Trump after November of 2020, so there might be a calculation there as well.
Back on the farmers, obviously they're an important group for President Trump's base. How much pain are they willing to take? Because they're taking more pain than anybody else and likely to still take more. So far, it seems they're sticking with them, but is there a limit for that?
There is almost certainly a limit, but again, I think this is one of those where he has tried through appropriations and through billion-dollar programs to do something about it. Now, that's been criticized by some of his own senators in the Republican Party, but there is an attempt at least to provide bailouts for some of the farmers as a way of at least getting them to, encouraging them to stay put.
We'll talk about North Korea later, but one of the things that's been going on throughout this is a hope that China can help us with North Korea in terms of denuclearization. Is there a possibility that there'll be a quid pro quo, the Chinese will help us if we give up something else in the trade area? Is that kind of thing, is that a good idea to make those kind of relations?
It is one of the things that we hire presidents to do, is to make trade-offs on national security and economic policy. So if that is going on, and we can't really see clearly whether there's any sort of, those are sorts of things handled at a very high level and with a great deal of discretion. If that is going on, which I kind of doubt, I think these might be more separately being negotiated, but nevertheless, if it is being discussed, it could be seen as a triumph to get a more convincing denuclearization agreement.
The Republican Party among the two national parties was always the party known more for free trade. Yes. That's not the case now, it appears, because even the senators, where they have a majority in the Senate that are Republicans, their criticism of this had been kind of muted. Is that another sign that the Republican Party is not the party of free trade, it's the party of Trump now?
I think it is a sign that he has managed to really change the narrative. On the other hand, it's not as if the Democrats have jumped to embrace free trade either. In this sense, they're reflecting a larger concern that the United States needs to recalibrate its economic policy and become much more economically nationalistic than it was in the past. So in this sense, Trump may have pushed the Republicans in a particular direction, and you can see that in some of the Wall Street Journal reactions. But I do think this is something in which he has a fair amount of popular support.
Dr. Thomas Schwartz of Vanderbilt University is our guest. We're talking foreign policy issues. This last segment we've been talking about the trade war with China. We're talking about what's going on over in the Middle East and Iran after this break.
This is a Storm 5 weather update. For weather on the go, download